Hello, hello. Hi,
Hello, how are
Nathaniel.
you doing? It's good to
I'm
see
doing
you.
great, mate. How are you? Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
doing all right.
yeah.
I'm doing all right.
It's wild to me that we have been friends in the same kind of job family for so long, and I don't think we've ever run a workshop before.
I know. I mean, I think it's been a missed opportunity for all the wonderful people that we haven't been able to hang out. Genuinely, it's crazy because we went to university together. For those of you who maybe have never heard, so we've been knowing each other for a long time, and our careers have like had these moments where they almost look like they're about to cross. And I feel like this might be one of the first professional crossings. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. So I thought we'd open by just introducing ourselves, introducing what this event is, introducing what we're going to be doing, how it's going to work, and then we'll launch straight in and make a mess of it for 2 hours. How's that sound?
Sounds good. Sounds good. I can start by
You
introducing
first.
myself. Hi, folks. My name is Nathaniel Okenwa. As Kevin would know, I talk a lot and I write code. So my friends call me Chatterbox Coder. That's where you can find me on all the socials. And I work for a company called Twilio, which is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Twilio, for those of you who don't know, it does many things. But here's the TLDR. We are telecommunications APIs that help you build amazing communications into your applications. That sounds like a lot of words, but you've definitely used Twilio at some point. If you've ever received a text message from a company, a phone call from a company, maybe a 2FA text, lots of emails when it comes to Black Friday, even all sorts of communications, chances are they may have been using Twilio under the hood. Some of your biggest brands and favorite brands that people use Twilio under the hood. But we also do so much more. So if you do want to find out about some of the more advanced use cases, feel free to chat to me because the well of Twilio can be quite bottomless.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to put it. Yeah. If you're here, you might be coming from the Twilio world and not have heard of Directus before. So I will also tell you a bit about Directus. Directus is a backend, basically, that you can use to build wicked applications. You connect it to a new or existing database and any number of asset storage. I don't know if it's like the word sheep, where it's the same in plural. And you immediately get developer tooling, including APIs, a real-time interface, authentication, and a user management system, and this really lovely web application with which to interact with that database, which you can easily hand to people who aren't developers. So you don't need to build APIs, and you don't need to build kind of these admin panel backends. Really cool tool. And today we get to converge the two, which I'm really, really excited about. So the project today is, a little bit more preamble. This event's happening as part of Leap Week 3. This is our week of announcements. On Monday, we did a keynote where we announced Directus 11, which is coming out this week as a release candidate, where we announced new shows for Directus TV. This platform you're watching this video in right now has now 35 shows worth of content. So you can go and potter around and find some cool
awesome
content
too. Like, I must say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I'll pay you under the table later. And also and a bunch of other things as well. This is one of the workshops that's happening this week. So this one right here is this Twilio workshop. After this, like an hour and a quarter after the end of this event, is 100 apps in 100 hours live, where Bryant and some of our colleagues are going to build an app in 60 minutes. I don't know what he's going to build yet. I'm not sure he knows yet. So that'll be chaotic, as it was last time. Tomorrow, we're doing a workshop with DeepGram, which is a voice AI company. We'll be building a cool project there, and then a community social networking thing on Friday, using a platform that doesn't suck. So you can come and have a chat with other people who use or know about or are interested in Directus in hopefully not too much of an awkward format. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're here for this Twilio workshop. And what we will be building today is a panel extension for Directus Insights. So Directus Insights is this dashboard builder tool here that we have. And in a dashboard, you have any number of these panels which can interact with the data in your database. But these panels aren't just for reading data. You can actually put components within them that are interactive. So you can add like forms and buttons, and you could just run arbitrary code in them if you want. And that's what we're going to be exploiting today.
So from what
So
I'm hearing, right?
yeah,
Because I've not played around with Insights. So Insights
yeah,
essentially just give you the ability to create components that are powered by your data. So there are some obviously components that are really well built. And then it doesn't actually have to just be reading data, because the thing that I'm really excited about is the fact that the stuff we're going to do is going to read data, but it's going to interact with it and cause other things to happen as a
exactly.
result. And that's something which I think is very, very powerful, especially when it starts to come to like workflows and building maybe internal tooling as well for people. This could be really, really useful.
Ding, ding, ding. So we've not spoken much about Directus, so you're kind of coming at it pretty fresh as well. So please keep asking questions. But yes, you said a pair of words there, which I think is really interesting, which is internal apps. And I actually think that is the kind of hidden power of Directus Insights. While all of the panels that ship out the box are very much about, building graphs and charts and reading data and analyzing it, it's not just that. And you can also obviously build panel extensions and distribute them through the marketplace. So today we're going to build a panel that will have a drop down and show you the users inside of your Directus project. We'll add a phone number to those users, and so there'll be a phone number attached to them. And then you press a button, and we'll use please forgive me if I get it wrong, the Twilio Voice SDK.
Yes.
Is what it's called. Fantastic. And we're going to call that person from the browser. So the browser will connect to a phone number and do a two-way call.
Cool. Yeah, I'm really excited because this is something which I think lots of people, oftentimes we end up having tools in different places, right? So for example, especially when it comes to telecommunications and telephony, we always like separate so that you'll have your email account or a phone like application or something separate to all the places you have your data. And yeah, I'm not saying that's not bad, but when you start wanting to be efficient or maybe have some more smart and cool interactions, bringing those two together gets really powerful. And
Exactly.
I think like what I could see here is, and we could talk about like potential use cases. Look, we're not trying to sell you a thing, but kind of just tell you practically some of the ways in which you could be using these tools. And I think like this, it could be a good way for you to, for example, like quickly integrate communications without necessarily exposing PII. Like you can have it so the person using the tool never sees a phone number, but is still able to phone them. Some of your favorite ride sharing apps kind of use a similar technology behind this. If your driver ever calls you to be like, hey, I can't find you. But anyway, I'll stop talking. Let's get on.
No, please do. A couple of other just bits of context. So we'll refer to the Directus docs, obviously a bunch today. We'll take a look at some of the extension docs. As part of that, inside of these docs, there are a couple of existing Twilio guides and one additional non-Twilio guide. And I want to talk about them before we crack on, so you kind of understand the approach which we are going to use today. First of all, there is this guide here called Use Custom Endpoints to Create an Authenticated API Proxy, which is a lot of words. So to break that down, custom endpoints are one of Directus's extension types, and they allow you to just create kind of what they sound like, arbitrary endpoints that you can hit. We expose an express router, so it works just like that. You set up route handlers, and then you can hit them. But within the context of Directus, you can start doing stuff like checking if the user's authenticated in Directus, or checking their permission sets, and so on and so forth. So this is an example where we actually just expose the full Twilio, let's find it here, where we expose, let me find it, Twilio host, where we expose just a root URL, and then what we do is we check whether you are authenticated. And that's the key part right here, which means you can't just hit this endpoint from anywhere, right? You have to do it either with your Directus API token or cookie, or from within Directus itself. So that's one. The second one is another Twilio integration. This uses our automation tool, Directus Automate. They're called flows, each kind of workflow. And this one here allows you to send SMS notifications. So that's kind of interesting.
can you do for these flows? So, because like obviously with SMS, when I'm talking to devs who are building into their applications, they're often either a couple of things. Either they want to send a message like when a specific action occurs, maybe they want to do a batch like at the end of the day, or there's like a campaign going out, especially when you start getting to marketing and stuff like that. And the same with email, because we also we have email API. So like, how can people trigger those things, those flows?
Great question. 5 ways. Event hooks. So something happens in your Directus project, often in one of your collections. A collection is a database with like additional Directus metadata. So when I say collection, you can think table, but it is not just a table, right? When something happens in your database, you can immediately fire off an automation. So this can be a new user is created, a new file is uploaded, or any of your tables have CRUD operations executed against them. They can run as blocking triggers, which means the whole flow has to see its way to the end, and then the database transaction will execute, so it like intercepts it. And as a result, you can actually fail out. So we have an example somewhere in our docs using a verification API, where if you fail the verification, we actually just block you from signing up entirely. It just never commits to the database.
That's
Actions,
really
on the
cool.
other hand, it is cool because you can also manipulate data in the middle. Maybe you enrich it or stuff like that.
Really, really
and
useful.
then you have actions which happen after data has been committed, or after a transaction has been committed. Then it will run. So that's event hooks. Then we have webhooks, so just inbound HTTP requests. We have a schedule. So, you set up an interval using the 6-point cron job syntax, and then we'll run the flow, which is how you could then batch. Or 2 more, actually. There's another flow, so you can compartmentalize functionality and trigger other flows from like your controller flow and pass data in and backup and stuff like that. And then finally, manual. And what manual does is, in your data views, where you've got your list of all your items in a collection, or you're in an individual item and the editor, there's a button you can press that will pass in the IDs of the items that you've either checked in the collection or the page, and then send that into the payload as well. Manual flow triggers also have confirmation dialogues, so you can pop up and collect a bit more information. There's the button there on the right, and you can pop up a box, ask for arbitrary information, and then trigger the flow, which I think is a very, like, I'm looking at thinking comms. This is a very communication type option here. You can go and write a message and hit go, for example. So they're the triggers. There's a bunch of inbuilt operations. You can also build custom operations. But that allows you to interact with your database, make it external web requests, just write some arbitrary JavaScript that can manipulate data in a little more of a clever way.
But
yeah, so does that answer your question?
Is really cool about this tool. Yeah, no, absolutely. And a thing which I'm kind of noticing is the number of different ways, the flexibility that is given to you to try and to trigger these things in different ways, allows you to put the automation into different parts of your application. Especially, I'm loving the filtering functionality. I can already spin off a couple of great reasons why I'd use that. Especially when you start to want to reduce computational load, or reduce things from blocking other operations from going through, or vice versa when you actually do want to filter stuff. So that's useful. I'm going to play around with that next time I get a chance. So
I want to jump in. There's one more guide I want to show, because this guide is going to basically be the North Star for our approach today. And it is this, which feels a little bit weird, but it's using external weather data in a custom panel extension. And you might be thinking, I don't really see the translation between this and using Twilio in a panel. So before I explain this, maybe we take a moment to explain the Twilio flow in this, all the way from generating authentication tokens through to actually placing a call. So if I could hand over to you for a moment to talk about that, we'll come back here, and I think it'll all come in quite nicely. I can share your screen, or you can just talk. It's completely up to you.
Well, I can start by just talking, and then we can get even further. So we start with the Twilio voice API. So Twilio has a bunch of different APIs, and we have one that we focus on programmable voice. I would say one, it's more of a collection because even within voice, there's a lot of diversity depending on what you want to do. In today's example, kind of like the external weather data, we essentially want to have a component in a web page, and this component is going to be able to make phone calls out to the users that are stored in the Directus database. All right. So in the Directus backend. So what we're going to need to do is we need a couple of things. We need a browser component or a component that lives in a browser. So essentially a browser that is able to make phone calls. Your browser, unfortunately, doesn't have telephone APIs. So what your browser does is your browser can connect to Twilio's servers. And then Twilio then handles and creates telephony using old school telephony that like is really, really boring / complex or really, really interesting, depending on what floats your boat, and then does all of that in the background. But what we do is we expose an SDK which you can build into your front end applications. Now, there is one extra step which maybe adds a little bit of complexity, but I just want to talk a little bit about that, which is just a bit of authentication and security, because we can't just hand anyone the keys to make phone calls from any number in the world, right? So when you have a Twilio account, you have a phone number, and when your browser connects to Twilio, what happens first is there is an exchange of a token. A token must be generated. That's what we call it. And that browser must use that token to connect to Twilio. Now, that token gives it a couple of things. It first says, hi, I am Nathaniel's computer, and I am connecting to Twilio, and I'd like to be able to make phone calls. Also, it says, I have a phone number identity. So like a phone number which is attached to my identity. So when I do make phone calls, I will come across as if this phone call is coming from said telephone number. And these things happen in the background. Now, the SDK has a lot of flexibility. So we start off with a few basic methods which you can use. And then if you want to build a really, really custom interface, there are a lot more events that we expose. But if you are looking to get started with Twilio Voice, I would recommend heading over to the Twilio docs, which I am showing on my screen. They often take you through starting your first phone call. This is from a server. You may want to start your first phone call, but then we also have these client-side SDKs, and we talk you through how you use the client-side SDKs. We have JavaScript SDKs, iOS, Android, and we even have React native SDKs. I often like to say it's good to start with a quick start and then work backwards, because the quick start builds all of that functionality and then you can customize it as you are. But then there is also the reference if you want to dig deeper into all of the methods and the things going on behind the scenes. Is there anything I've left out? I know we've talked about this before.
No, you did mention the thing I hoped you would mention, so I can explain why weather data and Twilio are related. Before I jump in, actually a reminder for those watching you, we've got a chat here. I'm watching it. So by all means, ask questions, thoughts, concerns, grievances even, and we'll address them as we go. But let's come back to my screen. Right. Why does this matter? Extensions in Directus live in one of two places. They live in the data studio, which is the web app, or they live in the data engine, which is the backend, an API side extension, you could call it. The browser, because of just security in the browser and the way that we lock that down, can't always confidently make an external web request, right? It can't go off to Twilio and say, hey, go generate an access token for me. In this example, the same way it can't go out to a third-party weather API confident. Like if you control both sides and you configure security on both sides, you'll be fine. But you often don't control the vendor. You don't control Twilio. You don't control the weather API. So what do you do with this? Well, you use an endpoint. Use an endpoint, which is an API extension. You use an endpoint first to actually make those external requests do what it needs. And then your front end extension, the panel in this case, and in this case in the tutorial, then calls an internal endpoint, because that's what it is now. It's now going to be like /Twilio token, my Directus project /Twilio token. So it's now an internal API. So you treat it like a proxy, which is actually not dissimilar to the post I showed earlier. To bring these together and make sure that you always have both of them and you don't have to deploy them separately, we have a concept called a bundle. So first you create a bundle extension, which is an empty shell. then you add an endpoint, then you add a panel. And when you install the bundle, you get both of them together as is required.
So
that's going to be
hearing you right. Just as a mental model, what I'm hearing is in this bundle, if this bundle was the application that fits into the panel, you kind of have the component, which would be the front end logic, and then the endpoints can stand in for like almost like your server side. I know this is a weird way to think about it, but ways that you can query data and interact with other applications.
Yes and no. The only thing I'll change there is query data, because panel extensions, for example, can query collections in Directus without needing a server. So if it's within the bounds of your Directus project and the services we provide, in fact, we have them. They are called
query external data. So data from outside.
Correct. Because, for example, your front end, your app extensions is what we call them. Your front end extensions have immediate access to all of your data because you're in this authenticated, box that you can work within. But yes, exactly. So the reason I wanted to show this weather panel thing is because that's basically, we're going to follow a very similar approach here. We're going to create a bundle. We're going to create an endpoint which will allow us to generate a token. Then our panel will call that to grab the token and then use the voice SDK. So we've been talking for probably about 20-ish minutes. I'd love to jump in. Now, the format this is going to take, we decided just because of the fiddliness of certain parts of this, is we are going to go nice and slow, but we're going to present. We're going to build it together. You can watch, and this will be available on demand if you want to play along. This will also get turned into a blog post. Hello, those on demand. This will also turn into a blog post you can follow if reading, technical material is more your thing. So if you're watching along, I would say don't try and play along necessarily, but take advantage of the fact the chat is here, because we're here to chat to you, right? Otherwise, this would just be just a video, but this is a live event for a reason. Before we jump in, is there anything else you want to add?
Nothing comes to mind. Let's get going.
Let's get going. So
why don't we do this? Why don't we have you start with like spinning up the environment that we're going to use, getting us set up, so that we are ready to start building the telephony parts, and then I can step in. I can focus on building the Twilio parts. I know we will switch between them and then connect those together and then do a little test as well.
That sounds good. I actually had a little bit of a rundown structure which looks slightly different. We'll follow yours, but as a result, this might end up being slightly more chaotic, but I like that. I like that format a little bit more. The gremlins have just returned home, so we'll see what happens in the next 10 minutes. Can you hear that? You can hear that, yeah?
Oh, now I can. Now I can.
Yeah, now you can. So here I have a brand new, completely empty code editor. I am running Docker in the background. We'll be running Directus locally with Docker. So if you're following along, you'll need that. And what we're going to do first is we're going to create a docker compose.yml file. And I do just happen to have here SQLite. I do happen to just have a light one pre-written because you don't want to watch me write this. Go grab the latest version of Directus, expose it on port 8055, map some of the internal volumes that Directus uses to local directories. So when we first run this, it will create a database and uploads and an extensions folder. We need a key and secret, which you should replace with a random value. To me, replace with random value is random enough for today. The initial admin email and password, you of course can change that. We're going to just use SQLite because we don't need anything more heavy, and so that will pop the file inside of this data file here. WebSockets are enabled, not that I think we're going to use them today, but this exposes a WebSocket and GraphQL subscription interface for subscribing to updates in Directus. This one line here is not in our quick start. In our docs, and it just will improve the developer experience of building extensions. Whenever we'll set it running, so whenever we save, it will rebuild. Whenever it rebuilds, it'll auto upload in Directus. So with that done, we're going to go ahead and just taking a quick look at the chat. Hello, Scott. I'd like to see a collection that logs different tokens for Twilio or other APIs to variable use token by another key. Then you have internet access to modify tokens for phone numbers or something. This seems to always be missing in Directus, and you end up doing this outside Directus UI. Hold that thought for some short period of time. We know, but today we'll use environment variables here in the Docker Compose file. But we're not gonna. That's not going to be the approach today, in the interest of time. And then Docker Compose up. And that should just do its thing, he says. There we go. Running all the first time setup, and then it will run in just a moment at 8055. So localhost 8055, and there is our brand new Directus project.
That was so quick.
Yeah, I like it. It's pretty sick. And this is also full fat Directus. It's not like a shitter version you run locally. Like, it is the full thing. When you use Directus Cloud, this is what you use. The only caveat here is SQLite does not have geospatial plugins included out the box. So if you want to use the mapping features, you'll want to use just a different Docker Compose that's in our docs. It just takes a little longer to bootstrap, and it wasn't necessary for today. Okay. Right now, there are a bunch of Directus collections that have been created out of the box. Directus doesn't alter your tables in order to run. Instead, we create this, I don't know, like 20-ish tables, all prepended with Directus _. That means if you want to get rid of Directus later, you can just delete the application, delete these tables, and it's like we were never there. But this handles all of the UI, all of the settings, all of the configuration. They all live here. And the one thing I'm going to do, because you can extend these, you can't delete these default fields, but you can add new ones, is for all the things that are here, avatar, email, title, you know, all of these, there isn't one for a phone number. So I am just going to add phone, because I think that's going to be useful for later.
Oh.
I, out the box, had this one user here. But I think it would be...
So quick question. So when you added phone, you did it as a string. Just question, can you do any sort of validation from there on that input?
Yeah, you can indeed. Over here, edit field, validation.
Nice. And validation, what kind of validation do you use? What are the rules? What is it?
Fantastic question. I think you can just throw in a regex, to be honest. Yeah, match it. So you could,
but also it's got a bunch of other ones. Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And you can do, like, you know, logical. You can do grouping, right, and stuff like that. We'll leave it, and we'll just trust ourselves to put phone numbers in, right? Don't do that in the real. I worked at another telephony company that offers APIs in the past, and you and I both know no one ever knows how to put a phone number in correctly, and it's a huge pain in the ass. So enforce validation.
And it's also because many different places actually regionally write their phone numbers differently. So the way Americans write their phone numbers, especially compared to Europeans, even like recently, I had built an app. Go to Singapore. We're testing the app. The app fails because Singaporean numbers just have way more digits than we had accounted for. So making sure you keep it flexible for all of these inputs. But anyway, phone number.
Give me a phone number in whatever the format Twilio likes. I mean, I think Twilio likes the plus.
Plus 44.
Yeah.
79 47 57 41 48.
Why are you giving me two numbers at a time? Anyway, whatever. Here, there, we put you in. This is a user now in our project. If I provided the email and the password, you would be able to, log and enabled app access. You would be able to log in here. The password is hashed when you save it, but you could just pop it in here. Yeah. See, I see it in the chat here. I have to add a 1 in brackets. Like, it's a huge, honestly. Also, Americans in particular, that 1 in the brackets, and sometimes you put other numbers in the brackets too. Archaic, absolutely archaic. Anyway,
I mean, it's as bad as them putting the month before the day and the date.
I'm not even gonna. No.
All right. But seriously though, there is international standards, ISO. I forget what the rest of the number is, but there is a.
Is it the E164 thing?
I believe so. Yes, there is an international standard for phone. Yes, E164. That's what I meant to say, not ISO. I don't know where that came from in my brain. But you should check this out. And what you can often do, there are lots of tools, and one that is actually sponsored by Twilio, where they can change inputs to fit the format. So it's always international plus international code, then the digits with no spaces.
But interestingly, other telephony API company matches E164, but doesn't put the plus in front of it. So I don't think it's technically to standard, but whatever. Twilio needs the plus. We've put the plus in.
No, Twilio doesn't need the plus. Like, we will pop in the plus.
Oh, interesting.
But the important thing that I recommend to people is that you use that format when you have it stored, because it's then uniform across every single phone number.
Absolutely.
What you don't want to do is have some people have that ability and some people don't. So whichever way you do it, store it in your database, in your backend, as like just one format, and then have logic that separates it out and changes what it looks like to users based on regionalization.
And not to derail us too much here, but Twilio does provide an API which formats phone numbers. I think it's called Insights or Lookup or something. Lookup, like the basic tier or whatever, will format the number for you. So you could introduce that as either a filter or an action event-based trigger, and you could format it before it ever gets to your database. You rely on, the user to get it somewhat correct in order to know. You drop the country code entirely, for example, and sometimes it won't know which country is it. But in any case, I feel our time slipping away. So we have set up a project. We've added this extra field. I've added you in here. You'll be the guinea pig who gets the calls. Next in my little list was to add a bunch of environment variables and handle like all of the Twilio configuration, so we can focus on extension building. But I'm happy to get to the point where we first need a Twilio environment variable to do that. So it's up to you. What do you want to do?
Why don't we jump to my screen and start from the console? I'm going to start from the dashboard.
But like 5 times zoomed in, like 5 zoom in points, please.
Would you like me to zoom in more?
No, that's good. That's solid.
Cool. All right, let's go. So the first thing we're going to need, because we're going to be making phone calls, is we're going to need a phone number. So we're going to come over here in our dashboard and we're going to find our active numbers. Now, I actually went in and bought a phone number earlier. And the reason I did this is because phone regulations, and some of you maybe who've used Twilio in the past, buying a phone number can be very, very quick and simple. However, there are regulations that come in from countries and governments, and it's really good because it helps protect us from spam, which means you often have to upload either ID or maybe an address, and other sorts of identification to say that you are who you say you are. So I had to do this. I uploaded my ID with this number, and within half an hour, it was done. I will say I have a @twilio.com email, so that expedites it. But within 48 hours, we usually get it done for you. And you can still start building and sending messages to the phone number that was verified with your account. So, for example, when you create an account, you have a 2FA number. You can start messaging that 2FA number, but then to start messaging all users, you then need to have that extra level of ID and regulatory compliance. Okay, so I'm based in the UK, so I think we should just use a UK phone number.
Works for me.
So now I have a UK phone number, and this is the first number that I'm going to hold on and keep into a safe place. So now I own a phone number. Now the thing is, for us,
could I pause you?
Yes.
Throw me the phone number in our little joint chat and want to show what I'm going to do with it, because then I don't need to show again what we're going to do with them. If it's okay with you, give me 2 ticks. Stealing it for a moment. Over here in our Docker Compose file, we have these environment variables. I've added one called Twilio phone number. I'm going to take the one that Nathaniel just sent me here, and there will be a series of other environment variables that, as Nathaniel goes around the UI, I will populate here. A couple of them are sensitive, so I'm no longer going to show the Docker Compose. I'll show you what happens once we get them all populated, though. Okay, as you were.
Awesome. So now that we have this, the next thing we're going to need, and it's just underneath, is a Twiml application. Twiml applications are pretty important. They are ways that we can essentially give Twilio some instructions of what to do when phone calls happen. We are going to create a new Twiml application, and we're going to call this Directus Twilio Workshop. Now, what you often have is you have a voice configuration. This says what should happen when a phone call is made to or from this Twiml app. I'm going to come and fill this in just one moment, but I'm going to hit create for that. So now we've got this Directus Twilio Workshop. I'm going to open it into a new tab, and I'm going to come back and grab this SID. I need this SID for what we're going to do next. So this is the identifier of the application that we are going to be using. All right, one more thing that I need to do. I'm going to be using something called functions to do this. You don't actually need to use functions. You can write your own endpoints and your own ways to do this, but I am going to be using this. I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to be creating a function that uses the Twilio client quick start, and I'm going to give it that AppSid that we just collected. I'm also going to give it a phone number. This phone number is the caller ID, and we're going to create it. Drum roll, it's creating in the background. Any second now. I know why it's failed to create.
The Twilio cogs go brr.
The reason why it's failed to create it is because I did a practice run a couple of minutes ago and they have the same name. So I'm just going to quickly delete these and then start again. Create this, pop in the caller ID, and pop in that ID. This time, touching wood, it should be fine. Uh-oh. Okay. I might have to come back to this. Come on, folks.
I can always do this step as well. Like it's all good. We'll get this.
We'll get there.
You got this.
Okay. Once I've done this one, we'll come back to it in a second. I think it's just like deploying, and it's actually going and taking down some assets, and it maybe it's just taking a second. But we'll come back to this. Okay. So we'll come back and do this later. But for now, we have our Twilio phone number. We have our Twilio API AppSid. And then we also need one more thing. We need to get API keys and tokens. And
we need your account SID.
Yep.
As well.
API keys and tokens and an account SID. And this is essentially how we can authenticate with Twilio. Give me a second. Just need to log in because I've been in for a certain amount of time and I'm trying to access a secure page. And I need to turn over and hit my E.
So when all is said and done, to generate tokens using an endpoint in Directus, and to do all the stuff we're going to need to do later, there are 5 pieces of information we will need from Twilio. We need a phone number. We need the Twiml app SID, which you've generated. I'll grab it off you in a moment. We need your account SID, and we need an API key and secret, which you're in the middle of generating now. We'll use the API key and secret to generate tokens, and we'll do that in the endpoint.
Cool. Sending over the SID and sending
lovely.
over...
This is the Twiml app SID.
These are the API keys and secrets, and the Twiml SID begins with an AP. So if it starts with an SK, it is always a secret key. If it starts with an AP,
man, you just sent me 3 long ass numbers, and I don't know. Right, the first one is what?
So if it starts with an SK, it's a secret key.
Yeah, right. Got you.
The one under the secret key is the secret. No, so it's secret keys partner. Secret keys is the secret key secret. Yeah, and then the last one that starts with an AP is the Twiml app.
Yeah, right. I'm going to just say this again. The one that begins AP is the Twiml app.
Yes.
The one that begins 2K is the API key.
Is the API secret.
All right. And the one that begins SK is the
API key.
Right. Okay. Cool. That's why we double check. Can you imagine if we got much further and we're just like, why the hell isn't this working? It's because I miscopy and pasted a key. Freaking hell, man. I need your account SID too. And then we've got everything we need from the Twilio side.
My account SID lost.
Thank you. And we need to just make sure that function can be deployed correctly. And that's linked to the Twiml app.
Let me quickly go there and try this one time. I'm just going to quickly repeat this function. All right.
Good. We're literally still in setup. I'm having a blast doing this with you, by the way. We should do it more often.
Yeah. All right. Now it works perfectly fine because there's nothing else that has the same name. And let me just quickly tell people what this generates. This generates a function with just a little bit of code that just says that if this number is coming from a Twilio client, it should be forwarded to whoever it's going to be calling, and vice versa. Right, sure. I'm going to copy this.
It's kind of nice that you could just create it from the boilerplate and forget about it to a degree. Exactly. I still need your account, Sid, and then we are all groovy. And we can get on to building. Yeah, you didn't send it to me.
It's the last one.
Huh?
AC.
Oh.
There
cool.
you go.
All right.
And last thing, I'm just going to quickly grab this URL, head over to the Twilio Twiml app that we created, and pop it into our voice. And voila, we are done.
Lovely. And what I will just say is the recording will be available on demand. We'll also write this up. So there was quite a few little moving parts there. They do all have purposes that, that are important in this whole journey. We'll detail them there as well. So you can, in case it hasn't quite sunk in, it can. Of course, we also have the chat if you want to ask further questions now. But with that, can I take my screen share back?
Yep.
Wonderful. So I popped all of those environment variables inside of the Docker Compose file. And now I just need to restart. So Control-C, up and enter. And now we restart the Docker container, and it will grab those variables and put them in the environment. So there we are. So now we're ready to actually go ahead and just start creating an extension. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a new terminal over here. And in here, this is this folder. I want to get into this extensions directory. So cd extensions, and I'm going to run npx create Directus extension. Extension. That doesn't look right. Extension. That's correct. Latest, just to make sure I definitely have the latest version of that. So I get to pick the extension type that it will boilerplate. And I actually want a bundle, which I just happen to know is the last in the list. So I went up. I can call it whatever I want. I suppose I'll call it Twilio. I'll call it Twilio, whatever. Auto install dependencies. So just a reminder that a bundle isn't really an extension type in its own right. It's a shell where we can put multiple extensions. Now, when these were originally created, they were actually to share dependencies and and reduce the overall code bundle size. But they also have this purpose of making sure you can distribute multiple extensions together. So it's just going and scaffolding that now. And the moment that's done, we're going to go ahead and add an extension straight into that bundle. So we'll just give that a moment there. There we go. We will go into this new Twilio directory, and we will go, we'll run npm run add, I believe is what it is. And once again, we get to pick an extension type. Now, if you'll remember, we're going to build two. We're going to build a panel and an endpoint. The endpoint will generate the token. So we're going to do that first, make sure we can generate a token, then we'll move on to building the panel. So we want an endpoint, and we'll call this one Twilio token. We'll just do it in JavaScript, and it will go and add that to this package here.
And for those of you who are wondering, why are we doing all of these Twilio tokens? Twilio tokens are because you're not going to actually put any of the credentials that we've just generated. Most of them, none of them actually going to live in the browser because that's unsafe. Someone could find them in the client. But what they do is they can be used by this function to create a temporary token, which then gets sent to the browser. Does that make sense? So we use these tokens from Twilio, or no, these credentials from Twilio, I'm going to call them, to create tokens. That token, it uses the account SID, API key and secret to say, I am a Twilio approved, like I am the person on this account making this request. It then uses the Twiml app SID to say, this is the application I want to interact with, and I would like to have permission to interact with. And then that generates a token which gets sent over to the browser, which can now interact with Twilio.
Hang on a minute. Did it update in the thing here? It does say extensions reloaded. That was just while it was in the middle of boilerplating. I'm just going to restart the Docker container. I don't think I actually need to do this. I just saw an error and I was like, ugh. Let's work that out. So I think it should just be Twilio token. Twilio token. Oh, there it is. Oh, there we go. So that is this wrap. Ahoy world. Ahoy world.
And for those of you who are wondering why we said Ahoy world, Ahoy was the greeting that was created for, it wasn't created for, but it was used for phones when phones were first created.
I thought it was the first word ever said down a phone line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Ahoy world. Great. So we've checked that works. Now in here, we want to go ahead and actually generate a token. So I'll just create a new endpoint, a new route handler here. So router.post. And we'll call this one generate recres. Again, if you've ever done any kind of Node.js web development, this will feel very, very familiar to you with good reason. This is just the Express router that we're exposing inside of it.
Feels like Express.
Yeah. That's exactly what this is. Now, inside of here, we want to go ahead and use the Twilio helper library, SDK. What do you call it?
From here, it will be the Twilio helper library.
The Twilio helper library. And so we actually want to go ahead and install that. So npm install Twilio.
Hello.
Fantastic. Now we want to go ahead and use it. So there is a page in the docs. Let's find it. I actually saved the link earlier to just shortcut here. This is the access tokens page, and this shows us how we can generate access tokens. The access token, oh my God, what are these kids doing? I swear they're getting like pan lids and they're just going, can you hear them?
I can a little bit.
Yeah, like this. Anyway, so an access token is just this really, really long string here that contains this information.
It's a JSON web token, just in case some people know, so you can break it apart into its pieces.
Now we just want to go ahead and generate them, and the docs for Twilio provide these different snippets here. We are going to be using the voice SDK in the browser, so we're actually going to use create an access token. So what we're going to do here is go ahead and copy and paste this into this. Now, there's a few things we're going to do. Ahead of time. So we are going to, one moment. We are going to obviously pull these to the top.
Those we definitely don't want these need.
Inside.
We need to bring in our environment variables.
We do need to bring in a couple of our environment variables, or we could just use them directly from process.env. But I was going to say this is an ESM environment, so we are just going to very quickly change the way that we import Twilio here. So we'll import Twilio from Twilio, and then the access token will be Twilio.jwt.access token. That was it. It was just a small semantic change there, but it is important. Then we'll take the rest of this.
That's just bringing in the environment
you're
variables.
dead right. You're dead right. And I believe that is exactly what I called them in the Docker Compose file, so I don't need to do anything with those. Then, and this is now where we're moving into the actual route handler itself. We're going to go ahead and generate a token.
Talk through that as well so that people know what's going on. So the outgoing application SID is the application SID we created earlier. So if you remember, I generated it, and he's going to pop that in. And then we also have an identity. Now, remember, because this is a browser panel, this browser panel could be anyone. Usually, you would decide a string to identify who is this browser. Quick question. Do we have access to who the logged in Directus user is right here?
We absolutely do. And we're going to come back to this once we have the panel. Because the panel is going to send an authenticated request to this endpoint. And within that authentication will come the ID of the user, along with all the roles and permissions that user holds. So for now, we'll just hard code it as a user, but we are going to swing back around to this later. And as you said, actually provide the user ID.
Cool. All right.
Now, I don't think if we take a look, all right, we're not doing incoming calls, but I think we'll just leave it as is. We generate a new access token with all of these values we've set up. The only thing left to actually do is return this. Yeah, res.send, and we'll just send this value instead.
Just in case people are wondering, they're like, what is that voice grant stuff I'm seeing? That's because you might want to give multiple permissions to different products with one token. So you can give a voice grant, a messaging grant, a conversations grant, a video grant. You could do all of that and send it in one token just to give that token lots of permissions rather than doing this if you're using multiple products.
Absolutely. So with that, it's built, which is cool. This should generate a token for us. If we go to /Twilio token /generate as a post request, once again, it has the voice grants. It has our account SID, API key and secret. It has our identity, which is for now just a fixed string, but we will update that in a moment. And then it will go ahead and generate a token and provide it as a JSON web token, which is what we're going to need in our panel. So let's just quickly test this.
We expect to see a string of epic proportions and randomness show up in a second if this works.
Yeah. So Twilio token /generate, and we do.
Perfect.
Lovely. So that's fantastic. That's actually really at its absolute core all this endpoint needs to do. There are two things it doesn't do, which we're going to do later. The first is actually identify the user. And the second is be authenticated at all. Right now, any user on the web, if this was a hosted application, could hit this endpoint and generate tokens. Not good. So later on, we're going to make sure that this is more locked down. But for now, I think this is good.
Yeah, and a thing that, and you can keep going while I say this, a thing that people must remember on the web is just because a URL is not publicly advertised does not mean that people will not be able to find it. And oftentimes people use like just URLs that are public to create really important private stuff like this and end up creating holes that the application can be exploited through. So make sure you protect this outside of demo land as well. Okay, Absolutely. So we're creating now our actual panel.
Yeah, is that how you spell dialer?
Yeah, that was perfect. You corrected yourself.
Nice. We'll just do it with JavaScript again. So we're adding this to the bundle now. The nice thing about this is we only need to be running like npm run dev at a bundle level, and it will rebuild when the things under it are updated as well.
Cool. So where can you see this panel extension?
Yeah, let's npm run dev this, and let's take a little look. Firstly around the code, and then what it does. So there it is. I was like, where is it all? There we are, the dialer. The dialer is made up of two files, the index.js and the panel.view. The front end of Directus is built in Vue.js, and therefore, when you're building these app extensions, they are also built in Vue.js. So we have an ID. This has to be unique across the whole system. So you can't have two conflicting extensions. It's generally best practice to prepend this with your author name to namespace it somewhat. But for now, I'll just be like Twilio dialer, whatever. We provide a name. This will show in the UI. Don't know why I keep writing it like that. We are going to put in an icon. You can use any Google Material icon. Descriptions. Make phone calls. Now, all I want you to do for a moment is take in the fact that there is this option called text. And I'm going to show you what that does in the actual Directus UI in just a moment. Now, the panel is a Vue component. It takes in the props from the index.js. So here we have the text. Text is there. That's how data gets passed between this kind of configuration pane and the panel itself. And then it's just a Vue component. By default, out the box, it comes with the options API. You are, of course, completely able to use the composition API, which is, I think, what we're going to do today. I think most Vue developers now kind of lean towards expecting to see that. So what I'm actually going to do is delete. No, I'm not going to delete anything yet. I'm going to show you what this panel does. Okay. So let's create a new Insights dashboard. We'll call this Twilio Workshop. And we will restart our container. I didn't need to do that. I just needed to refresh the browser. That was it. I couldn't remember what step I needed to take. So I'm like, let's do them all. There we go.
Got to be sure. Better safe.
You got to be sure. There's our Twilio dialer. There's the icon of phone.
That was really easy.
You can also pass in. Yeah, it was easy. Thanks.
I mean,
you can also pass in these SVGs.
Workshop, but I'm still impressed.
Cool. You can pass in SVGs too. And as you can see, the SVGs are all purple. That is the theme color of the Directus project. You can also use these CSS variables in the SVG, which is kind of nifty. So they all feel, like they belong. There's the text. This is the show header right here. You can add extra configuration if you want, and there it is, show header. You can put some text in. I don't know, call people. There it is. There's the text that came from this configuration options. I think it's called options pane. We don't want text, but just want to show you that's kind of how it works. So now we're going to start ripping it apart. First thing I think we're going to do is we are going to, let's just have a think here. I think we're going to remove all the options. I don't think we need options in this.
No.
It has, it's going to just show the users.
Like an example is, for example, a lot of companies are international. So they end up having like a German number, a UK number, a different number. So I'm probably saying you could have like as an option, a drop down to be like, I want to phone this person, but from this number because they're in Germany and they want to use the German number. So that it feels familiar to them, something like that.
Absolutely. I think what we'll do here is we'll just empty that out to a div. And onto the let's just rock on. Let's just I love some boilerplating, but we're just gonna go from scratch. So, and I'm gonna use setup here, so we'll use the composition API. I'm not gonna bother reloading the browser because nothing's gonna show up. It's gonna be an empty box. So now we're at the point where with this blank slate, we can really talk about every line of code we're going to write, help you understand what it does, and build this extension that will call this endpoint we've created, which is now an internal API endpoint. We'll install and configure the voice SDK, and we will eventually just make a phone call. I'm going to pause for just a moment. We're about halfway through our time, and this is comfortable. This is a good spot to be in. Does anyone have any questions in the chat? And Nathaniel too, you're kind of seeing this set up, I think, for one of the first few times. Do you have any questions so far?
No questions. I'm curious. I'm really excited about some of the options as well. So you know how it had text. What are the
Yeah,
types of things we can put into that options thing? So like I just said like a drop down list, but are there other kinds of interactions or
absolutely.
ways we can select?
Yeah. All of the built-in, they're called interfaces in Directus. So form input, we call an interface. You can use any of the built-in interfaces. So you have the WYSIWYG, you have a code input box that does some syntax highlighting. What the hell's going on? You have a text box that, can be integer or float type, like you can enforce that. You have sliders. You have relationships. You can actually pull data from collections and select an item within the collection. All of the built-in interfaces in Directus are exposed to you through this.
Interesting. Good to know. Good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And you can also, in fact, if I just undo this slightly, there's other like meta information you can provide. You can hide values, make them like a password, ... It says width full. You can also do width half and put two things side by side. So we give you some flexibility around how that looks and feels.
And last but not least, like, because I'm thinking like we're making this panel and it's kind of just a demo one, but can people share panels maybe for other users to maybe try out?
Yeah, so on the Directus Marketplace, you can publish them on NPM. If you boilerplate it with the CLI, which I boilerplated mine with, everything's set up. You can just push it straight to NPM, and in a few hours, you'll see it appear in the marketplace.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool. Right, so let's move into the panel.view. Let's move into the panel.view. So we're starting from scratch. What are we going to do here? First thing we're going to do is import all of the composables that come with the with the Directus extensions SDK that we're going to use today. So we're going to import use API. We'll talk about what that does in just a moment, and use items. Once again, we'll talk about what that does in just a moment.
This is related to how, well, I know we're going to talk about it in just a second, but these are things that are coming from Directus that we can use in our component.
Correct. And actually, I might just take this moment to pause and show you inside of the composables right here. These components make working with Directus easier. Use API effectively wraps your API request with all of the authentication that comes in that is in your Directus client. So you could, of course, just use fetch, but then how does your endpoint know it's you? But if you instead use the use API, which I think it's Axios under the hood, it also sends all of your client details, and that's how we're going to know which users there, whether they're authenticated, and so on and so forth.
And this is really good because I'm guessing it means you don't need to write like all of that metadata into your request to your endpoint URL.
We're just going to use the use API composable instead. Use stores allows you to go in and actually access information, use information within your Directus project itself. So you can access things like all of the permissions users hold, data about the collections, the metadata about collections. And the other one I imported was the specific use items composable. And this will allow you to query data in your Directus project directly from your panel. So we're not going off to a backend to do this. We're doing this within the client itself.
And so
in turn, it knows what you have access to and will honor the access control of your logged in user.
So so this is like takes away the need to query a database because you are building an application almost inside/beside your database.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people see Directus as a CMS or see Directus as a backend for an external application, but through Directus Insights and through like these panels and through modules, which is another extension type, which is these. So they basically give you a blank slate, which you can build. It's the most low level extension type, I suppose. It's a good base to actually just build your application within the data studio itself. So pretty nifty. So we're going to use API to make that API call to get our token. We're going to use items to populate the drop-down list of all of the users that we can call. We're also, just because we're in a view app here, we're just going to import ref. There's nothing, we don't need to explain that terribly. That's just kind of quite boilerplatey stuff. Now we're going to create an instance of use API. We'll call it API, use API. And we're also going to now create our instance of use items as well. So we are going to pull out the items from use items. Now, the signature here is a little bit wild, so bear with me. The first thing we need to pass in, as shown here, I don't know why it's using this. Maybe I've told it a font that doesn't exist, but why the hell does it look like this? Anyway, the first thing we need to pass in is a ref that contains a string of the collection name we're querying. So we don't just pass in the string, we pass in a ref. Cool, we can rock on there. We can literally just ref. Not a problem, and we had to import it to do this. And we're gonna query the Directus users collection.
So use items now gives you access to all of the Directus users. You can just pull them in. Well,
because that is a collection in your database like any other. Now, we do have a distinction between system collections and user collections. User collections you create. System collections are these kind of 20 I showed you earlier out of the box. In fact, we haven't got any user created collections in this project. We're not going to use them. But yes, you can query these just like you can any other collection. So that's completely correct. And the second thing we provide is a query. Now, Directus has quite a robust, I'll show you here, quite a robust query language. Here it is. Not query parameters, that's what I was looking for. So you can specify what fields are returned. You don't need everything, right? You might only just need the ID and the title of a blog post, for example. You can apply filters. You can do searches. You can do like basic pagination, by limiting how many per page and what page you're on and what the offset is and so on and so forth. You can apply sorting and just more. Now we're going to do that just to specify what fields we want returned, because I don't want that huge object for every user. I just want a little bit less. So we're going to pass in fields. And we want,
and you can keep typing, but I'm guessing this is something like that people should always be doing, because it makes you're moving smaller chunks of data around, so only getting the things you need, rather than like, I feel like it's a very early in career developer move to just like pull down the entire database to get one field from one user.
And what's really, really nice about this is we expose a GraphQL, API, but we also expose a REST API. And now what I think is one of the core value propositions of GraphQL, which is you construct these complex queries that only bring back what you need. You can do regardless. You can really pick what's right for you. And this works with relational data as well. Here in the items, so in the use items composable, I could, for example, let's say there's a relation, right, called, I don't know, posts. I could be like posts.title, and I can start getting the relational data too. So it's really powerful.
So in that case, you almost end up querying two tables, right? Because you're querying a table and then querying. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And that's where being very selective about what you're bringing back is really critical, because another valid fields query is this. Give me everything on this level. Give me everything one level down. And you know what? You can do that. This is incredibly computationally expensive. But you could do this. Hurts. I mean, you could. But at any level, you could do this. You could be like, give me everything in the posts collection, for example. So we give you that flexibility. You can blow your own shit up.
There's great power comes great responsibility.
You absolutely got it. Now, what's going to come back from here is, in fact, this might be a point where if I just console log items, we can just get a little look in on what's actually happening here.
So I'm guessing we're going to see user 1, Nathaniel Okenwa.
Yeah, and there's 2 users. There's the admin too.
Yes,
my user.
I just have my phone. The account, right?
And you know what? We could apply a filter here that says just give me users who have phone numbers. I'm not going to do that. But if I refresh here, there's the array. The array has 2 users. The admin, no phone. Nathaniel, phone, as we expect.
Awesome.
Cool. What else is important here? I might just rename this users because items is a little bit of a weird word to use when they are users. So that's just a convenience thing, I think. And then what we're going to do now is populate a select, a drop down. And then when you select something, we're just going to bind it to a variable in here. So we'll just create that variable now. All we want is their phone number, right? We don't care about the rest of the objects. We just care about the phone number. And that can start off with a value of null. Now that we've pulled in all these users, let's actually display it up here. And now I have the kind of pleasure of showing you the component library. Here's something else. This is the component playground. These are components we use within the Data Studio that we expose to extension authors. So we are going to use the vSelect. And it has all of the kind of styling applied. Really, really nice, kind of out the box. This is what it looks like. We need to bind it with a variable, which is why I just created phone number. Phone number will go in there, and you pass in items. Items have text and value. Now, our items do not have text and value. They have first name, last name, phone number, and so on and so forth. You can change which field is used for the text. So we'll do like first name. In reality, you would probably do like a computed array that would add the first and last name together and display that. I am too lazy for that. We'll just display the first name. But that's what you would do in the real, right? So I may as well copy it, to be honest. There we are. Yeah. Let's put it inside this div here.
Okay, so
we don't.
That is, the value is going to be, so I'm guessing the value is going to be phone number that we created earlier.
Phone number.
Yeah.
And the items is going to be users.
Okay. So it's going to grab the list of users that we got.
Going to grab the list of users. As noted, we don't care about value. As noted, it's interesting that it did this because you're meant to do this in Vue. When it's an attribute. So we have the item text, which is first name, and there was item value. It was the one under it. Item.
So you can choose what is visible to click, but then what that value actually what it adds to whatever. Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, let's make this easy. Let's just print the value. So now if we refresh, there's our drop-down, admin, and Nathaniel. And when you pick Nathaniel, there's the phone
and it was
number.
blank when it was admin, because admin doesn't have a number.
Because actually, initially, it was I think I need to put in like a select. It's unset to begin with. It's null. So whatever, we would need to put in like a select a user default
state. Admin doesn't have a number, so
the admin doesn't have one though. But yeah, originally this isn't because admin has nothing. It's because it's null. But whatever, like small nuance, small edge case kind of thing there. So now we have that. Then we are.
I think we need.
We need a button. We do need a button.
We can actually
I think. Yeah, we do. Let's use another component for that. Let's look at here. We have V button, shock horror.
Dun, dun, dun.
I mean, it's just a V button. We actually need to do nothing else. I'm not even going to bother copying that, to be honest. V. He says, and then makes a typo. V button, call user, and then we will, when it's clicked, we will start call, and of course we need a function. Let's go. It's const start call. I think it needs to be an async function for later. I just happened right. I mean, we could change it later, but we'll do it out there. So there you go. That will start, and then we'll grab the value of phone number at that point. When we start a call, we will then go and grab the token. Tokens have a short lifespan, so you really want to grab them at the point you're going to use them, or very soon before. So we'll go and handle that.
Extend the token time to live. It is not recommended for you to just like create one that lasts a whole year. You want ones that are going to last a short amount of time.
Yeah, because I mean, if they're intercepted, they're usable basically. So yeah, you do only want them to live for a very short time. So We obviously haven't done anything with the use API yet, but I think you broadly understand what it's about to do. Do you have any questions? I'm pretty happy with how it's shaping up.
I like how quickly you can build especially with the component library, how quickly you can build this functionality. With and I'm guessing the great thing is like with stuff like that, you're standing on the shoulders of giants, of heroes, where like they have done all the sorts of things to like think. Like I saw you changing the width of the button, like really easy, just dragging it across and stuff. Like that was really, really useful.
This one's my favorite personally. It's called Fancy Select. And this is just a select, 2 items, a divider and a third item. And it's just a select, but look how pretty that is.
I love how the person
and that's used inside of the UI as well. We actually used it when we or did we use it actually? No, lied to you. I used it earlier today. So there you go. Right. Okay. Save. And refresh. There's the button. The button just runs this function. Now is the point where we can go and get the Twilio voice SDK. So let's go ahead and do that. And yeah, that's a really good point, Alex, in the chat. This makes customizations feel native by using the component library. It all feels native. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, it lacks polish. It needs some padding. But actually, to be fair, just by adding padding,
it would look really good.
Yeah, right. We're lazy, so this is what you get today. But you
speak
could
for yourself. I'm joking.
Speak for you. Yeah, I'm the one with the keyboard, so I'm speaking for both of us.
Hey.
Right. Let's go and install npm install. Hang on a minute.
Twilio, and I think voice SDK.
It is npm install at Twilio /voice
SDK.
Yeah. Not my first rodeo, Mr. Okenwa.
Yeah, I have made this mistake multiple times.
Now, before we continue, there is one more piece of configuration, and it does involve going back to that to the Docker Compose file and adding one more environment variable. Let me shove this up. We're still here underneath the eyes. Hello. I just want to get it to the point where I'm not about to leak all the information. So I will get rid of that now. Okay, back here. We're back here. Just above the cursor, a couple of lines, all those environment variables I don't want to show you, but we do have to add one more. You might be thinking, I'm pretty damn sure I've added enough of these now. Like I don't want to do this. But what we do need to do is, let's find it. I did write, because it's long. I did write it earlier. We need to add this environment variable. Why? What the hell is this? As mentioned earlier, the Directus Data Studio doesn't allow requests to external, necessarily without perfect configuration, allow requests to third-party services, like to third-party servers or whatever. And that's a security precaution. That's great. But we are going to be connecting directly from our browser to a phone number. I think strictly speaking, we could probably build this as an endpoint too and use the endpoint as like a middleman proxy, but we don't have time for that. The easiest way to do it is this environment variable, where we're basically changing the content security policy to allow the connection to this WebSocket URL, which is what the voice SDK is going to do in a bit.
I was wondering, I was like, I've never seen this before. But now that makes sense. So you're giving...
It took logging. Yeah.
Yeah,
so it took logging to work that out.
We are making sure that the Directus browser, I'm going to call it the Directus browser, which has these extra security rules around it. We're just like, yo, let WebSocket connections to this Twilio URL happen. Awesome.
Yes. And otherwise that will error. And while we were putting this together, that errored. Like I had to add that environment variable for it to work. It's pretty descriptive, the error. It tells you it's a CSP, a content security policy problem, and it's on this connect source value, and that it was while trying to access this URL. So, you know, it was pretty easy to work out, but let's save ourselves the pain and do it now. So we've installed the SDK. Yeah.
So we've installed the SDK, and as I'm talking, you can maybe like type. So with the voice SDK, we bring in the SDK and we bring in specifically a device. The idea of a device is anything that can connect to Twilio, because the device right now it's going to be a browser, but it could be a phone if you're using the like React Native or the iOS or Android SDKs, but we are bringing in a device, and that device needs to have permissions, and we give those permissions from a token. But we don't have a token now, so how are we going to get this token from our endpoint?
Great. We've kind of spoken about it already. We're going to use this use API composable. Call our now internal endpoint slash Twilio -token /generate as a post request. We'll then get the value here. So the way we're going to do that, we've already created this, is we are going to pull out the data value that comes back. I'm already going to just call it token. Await API.post, because it is just an Axios instance ultimately. We're going to go to /Twilio token /generate. That will return a string, which is the token, which we can then remove these question marks. We'll pop this directly in here.
And we are
That's how you pass
this device. Yes.
We're ready to register the device. There is one more thing I would just want to take a moment to do. And it's not, I've not taken note of it, but I just want to derail this for a moment. I did, shall I do it? Shall I do it after? It's the whole sending over the correct user and authentic. I think we'll make the request first, and then we'll see what happens. So we have a device, and then let's just console log device. Realistically, we're either going to see a device or we're going to see an error because that token's invalid. There is no other outcome. It's one of those two things. Extension's reloaded. I hit save. So we're going to refresh this. Open the console. Go to you. Hit call user. And there's the device. Rock on. What else is important here? Oh, no. We're not done. We need to also do device. We need to register the device. That's my bad. That extension's reloaded. I might just rename. I think it's alphabetical because, again, lazy. Oh, being too hopeful there, I think. Okay, whatever. Call user. Oh, problem. Why? WebSocket received error undefined. Oh, I think. Oh, I didn't restart I just needed to because I changed an environment variable.
That was the error he told us we were going to see, and he walked right into it.
Oh, but there it is, by the way. Refuse to connect to this URL because it violates the following content security policy directive. Connect source self HTTPS. So they were there, and then I added on to the end of it the WSS, Twilio voicing. The Twilio token generate is I feel like you probably came into this session a little bit later on, John. But here it is. We built it first. So yes, what we've built is a bundle. In the bundle is an endpoint and a panel. The panel calls the endpoint. The endpoint talks to Twilio, comes back, returns it to the panel. So yes, it is now a Directus custom endpoint by virtue of this file here. Okay, let's do that again. When you see an error in a workshop and you're like, damn, I hope this isn't going to derail everything, but no. There we go. No errors. We're good. No errors. Ooh. And we did see there, it did a post to the Twilio token generate endpoint. It returned in 25 milliseconds with a 200. So cool. That's pretty good.
Just to let you know, even though he hit the start call button, our code doesn't actually start a call. All it does is create a device, registered device with Twilio, and say, hey, device, I'm authenticated. I am now ready to start making calls and receiving calls if you set it up to do that.
Let's do this, and then we'll go back and neaten up the endpoint, because there's no problem now for a hard coding user in the endpoint, but in the real, you should not be doing that. So we'll cover that at the end as like it's not a next step. It is critical, but we will treat it as if it's a next step because I want to get a call. I want to get a call going. I'm getting impatient now. As you know, that is the person I am. Okay, so let's now, so there's one other thing here, which is this device doesn't register like that. Instead, it emits an event when the device has been successfully registered. Sometimes that takes a moment. I think that it also pops up and like asks you for,
Yes. So
mic
part of
access.
the reason why register can take a couple of seconds is because sometimes it needs to ask permissions to use your microphone, which could take you 1 second, 2 seconds. In Kevin's case, where he's already done we've done this before,
it doesn't
he's
show
already
up.
given it permission, so it's not going to do that. So while it may seem lightning quick for him, and you might be like, why do we have to do this and then wait for it to finish? It's not always going to be like that for all your users. So then what we use are these events where we say when the device has been registered, then we want to do something. Now, what a lot of people do, especially if they're creating dial-up panels, is you might register a device when someone opens the dialer, right? So that it's quicker, that when they click a call, they're already registered. And then you can already like say that something's gone wrong. You are not authenticated to use this dialer straight away once they open it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
The tokens don't last very long, and we use the token in the code when we register the device, and I don't think we use the token again. But what happens if the token expires between registering the event and actually trying to make the call? At what point has the handshake happened?
The handshake happens when you register the event, when you register the device, right?
Not when you make the call.
Not when you make the call.
Oh,
what you
interesting.
get is you also get a event when your token's about to expire and when your token expires. What we recommend people do is when your token's about to expire, generate a new token. So hit that API call and start a new token, get a new token.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, this limits your surface area for exploitation. So it may seem like a little bit of a faff, but trust me, you do not want to be hit with a crazy Twilio bill because someone's hijacked your phone call and used it to call premium numbers that paid themselves.
Love that. So we're going to make a call here. The call is going to be an object. I'm going to save it up here because we want to start the call. Later, we're going to want to handle hanging up, so we'll need access to that object in the global scope. So we're going to go const call, I think we'll call it, and we'll just again initialize that with a value of null. Now it's time to actually make the call. So we'll set the value of this ref here into device dot and yeah, thank you. My uncertainty was creeping in there. Yeah. And it has a params object, and the value is going to be phone number, this one here, dot value, because it's a so you step in and get the raw value.
You might be like, why connect and why is it that params too? Because there are a couple of things. You can phone numbers, but like within Twilio, you can actually phone video call rooms. So let's say people are having a video room, you can literally dial in to it from here. You might want to dial another client, which isn't going to have a phone number. It might have like a name attached to it, like the user that we have. So there could be a couple of things. We're using phone numbers here, but that could be a few other things, which is why there is a bit more flexibility, and I don't want to say ambiguity, but a bit more flexibility of what could go into that params there.
All right. This is everything we need to actually make a call. We're not done. We're not going to get any UI that we've made a call. There's going to be no ability to hang up. There's none of that. But I think this is a moment we can actually try this out.
All right.
That's it. We've 33 lines of code with a few lines of white space. And I think this might be all we need. So your phone number's in there.
Yeah.
Let's ready for the error. I am
ready for an error.
Oh, there it is.
Oh. Allow. You've hit call. I am getting a phone call. I'm going to mute my mic and just join the phone call.
Hi. Hey, yeah, you sound suitably terrible as phone calls do. I can't be bothered. I literally can't be bothered to figure out sharing your audio. Sorry, right. Nathaniel's like, you should share my audio. I'm like, I can't be bothered.
I was speaking on the phone. He could hear me. Just because we're not sharing audio via the stream, you couldn't hear me. So next time I won't mute my microphone. But his browser called my phone. Hey!
There was no indication we did it. There was no indication it ended. So there's some things we need to work out now. But we're
There were some
basically
sound.
Yeah.
There were
There
some
were some
sound
sounds.
things. So Twilio just built in, we have like these audio like files that it's like plays a sound when you connect, it plays a sound when you disconnect, but visually there are no cues. Now you can customize the sounds that are in there to have something that's like your own UI. And like what we're going to do next is you probably should change your UI so people can see visually what state the call is in.
We're at the point now where we are polishing this. When we get back to disconnecting the call, I think I'll slow back down. But for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to speed run this because this is just little view UI, things. So we do this. We currently have this div here that shows start call, pick phone number. So I'm going to create a new ref called show call. Sure. Let's make that false because at the beginning there is no call being made. The call, I believe, also emits events. Yes. So call.value is this. Then we'll go ahead and say call.value.on.
So there is a ringing. There is a I don't know if it's answered or connected off the top of my head. I will check it out later, but it's something to tell you it's connected and then one to tell you when it's disconnected.
Disconnected. I think we're going to be lazy and we'll just do ringing and disconnected because disconnected is by either hand, I think. It's just
disconnected is the phone ended, whether you hung up or they hung up. There is another way to like distinctly choose between which person hung up, but we're not going to be using that today.
Exactly. So show call.value becomes true. And then on disconnect, we'll set it back to false. Then in here, we'll say if not show call, do all of this. And then, just some chat here. Loving the potential of tying this ability in with other business use cases like customer engagement, etc. Not so. Yeah, I mean, I see like customer like outbound call centers as being like rich for this. We'll talk about that more a little bit later because I have some thoughts on where this could go in the future with more time. Also, the possibility to include the verification style systems, generate a confirmation code in Directus. You read it out. You could send it via Twilio and then confirm it on the phone, stuff like that. Yep. Excellent. Yeah, I love the part with the browser called a phone. So did we. I'm glad it worked.
The first time, right?
Crisis of confidence in it. Yeah. We also need, I suppose, just a else here, and we'll just say call in. Let's do it more like this. Call ongoing. Not that. P. I just want a P.
I was about to say, what is that P else?
No bloody clue. The first result having a mad one, and then I think we'll just want another button. But this one is end call. And exactly. And we'll do an end call function, which I will just create and we'll deal with it in a moment. Const end call. I don't. Doesn't hurt anyone.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, but right in there.
Yeah. So that's the UI. It'll call ongoing, end call, and then there's an end call button. It will do nothing. We do actually need to tie this up to ever get back to that first state by pressing the button. And I think call.value.disconnect. The same way we had a connect, there is also a disconnect. And then show call.value false. I think it's handled by this, but whatever. I want it to work first time, so we're just gonna keep throwing some redundancy in there. I think that's groovy. So extensions reloaded. Let's try this out. Nathaniel call. Nice. Good.
Call's coming in.
Answer.
Hello. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I hear you twice through the browser and through our streaming system, and it's twice too much, to be honest. Bye. Oh, forget that. It did hang up the call, though.
Stereo.
Yeah, it did hang up the call.
Dun dun dun. Oh.
I don't know what
is
this
that
is.
error?
Oh, it did hang up the call. Just before we get to this, because I think this might be in the voice SDK, but I'm not convinced. Get on proxy. Log is read-only and not configurable. Now that means log's being used somewhere inside of the call.disconnect, all right? Call._disconnect. All right, we are, yeah, it's here. It's somewhere in here. We are going into the depths of the SDK, the voice SDK, and I have a better idea. I have a better idea on how to handle this. Call.value.on error. Yeah. Damn. Is that going to work?
I do not know. I I am desperately looking up the voice SDK to see what that is.
Honestly, my guy, it's almost the end of our work day. You don't need to frantically look up anything. I'm swallowing the error. It's not an error if you swallow it and don't display it to the user.
There is a you're absolutely right. There is an error, but there is an on error event.
Oh, I made a guess there. Right, I'm going to call you again.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah. I don't care how you are, mate. Sorry. Bye. Okay. Interesting. We'll pause on that. I'm gonna refresh and call you one more time, but I'm gonna hang up because we actually haven't tested that side. Sorry, you're gonna hang up the other way. I've been the one to hit end call.
Okay.
Interesting. Look, worked great. Call ended. It's when I disconnect. Yeah.
Question. You when you disconnect.
Yeah. Here.
So you hit disconnect. Wait, hold on. I want to quickly check something because you've got on disc. Nah, that's on disconnect. I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure.
Neither am I. Refresh, reboot, pick up your changes. The changes that are happening. Look, when I hit save, just watch here. Extensions reloaded and other UI changes were displaying. So I'm confident that it's not that. But I'm happy to call this a success, to be honest. Now, there are a few other things we need to do. We need to, I think we must tighten this up a little bit because it's currently a little too open for everyone.
Because right
what we're going to do here is
anyone who gets access to this URL gets a token that allows them to phone anybody they want and charge it to you.
Agree. So, rec, I want to say it's accountability, but just in case it isn't, I'm going to just... Oh, do you want to know the way I'm going to do this, actually, is I'm going to go object.keys rec, and we can work from there. Oh. Was I too hasty? Is it building? Oh, but it's still building. It's packaging the whole Twilio SDK in, and that's why it's just taking a hot minute there. So we're going to do this. What's the best way of doing this? I think what I'll do is in the panel is I'll just pause on... I'll just comment all of this out briefly. I don't actually want to be making calls. Interesting there. Refresh. And call. And over in this terminal here, great. You
have accountability.
Paul asked in the chat, obviously you can lock this down in Directus, but I imagine inside of Twilio there are also options to lock down your numbers zip trunk as well, no?
Lockdown, ask that question again, lock down the...
Obviously you can lock this down in Directus. We might need to expand on what that means. But I imagine inside of Twilio there are options to lock down your numbers or zip trunk as well.
Lock down your numbers.
These tokens are the way to do that.
Yeah, these tokens
so you don't want to.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you're securing the generation of them.
So
accountability.
Yeah, the generation of these tokens is essentially how they are locked, and only someone with your credentials can create tokens, which means only someone with your credentials can create calls.
I'm going to pause you for clarification. Lockdown calling premium numbers or long distance, etc.
Oh, yes, you can. I can actually show you that in the browser. So there is.
I'll pop over to you while I just do this. There you go. It's yours now.
No worries. So you have voice geographic permissions. So eventually, let's go back to that. Voice geographic permissions. And give it a second, it will load. And so you've got programmable voice and sit trunking as well. And you've got, they give you also an average cost of how much things will be. You've got low risk and high risk. This is a connection. This is not just countries. So it's not entire countries that are high risk, although could be a large proportion of countries, large percentage of that country. It is specifically network carriers in specific countries that have been known to have a higher risk of toll fraud, so you can block them. So I can block the whole of North America. I can block specific country and so on. And then you can also pop in a number to check if it's got permissions at all. So that's another way to just lock it down. And this is great because it's on an account level. So your whole account can be locked down.
All good?
Yep.
I did the changes. So at the top of the route handler, inside of this request, this rec, you get this object called accountability. Accountability contains the following properties: user, role, whether or not they're an admin, whether or not they have app access, IP, user agent origin, and permissions. So you can further go on and expand, but all we care about is, are you logged in and authenticated with Directus? So that's all this does. And it says, hey, if you don't have a user ID, go away. Now I think about it, there might be more you want to do here, because you could just jam an accountability object and user. So there's probably some other levels of restriction you want to do here. For example, checking the user's role, which then will return they don't have a role because they're not a valid user. But I think this is okay. And then here in identity
being just user, it can be.
There you go. Rec.accountability.
And what is
which is the ID
name of the user that we're logged in on in Directus?
It's the UUID.
Okay, UUID. Cool.
It's the UUID of the user. I mean, if you want to see, we can just console log.
Well, because I was going to show how it appears in the Twilio logs when a call comes in.
Sure. Give that a moment just to reload one more time.
No worries.
Again, it's bundling that whole Twilio helper library into it. It just takes a moment to build. We'll hit that.
Did you uncomment the call?
No.
Yeah.
That would help.
All right. We'll make this a short call, just so we can show you the logs. So now only authenticated users on Directus can use this application. He's going to call me. I'm going to answer. I'm going to keep it on for 1 second. He's going to end the call. My phone call ends. And then I'm just going to refresh my logs so that we can see the latest call that happened, which was which was this one. And we can see here it's completed from a client, and it was from client. And then this was the UUID that he talked about. I can actually show you a previous call. Remember, it used to be hard coded to user. If I go to this one over here, we can see it was client user before, and now it's client and then the user ID.
That's cool.
Cool.
So, I mean, I think, and I've thought about it more actually, and I may update the docs. I've just thought about it in this moment. The user actually, this doesn't prove the user is authenticated. It proves that there is an accountability object with a user value that is not falsy. That's what I check against. But what you may want to do is expand this further, use the permission service, check they have certain permissions, which they either will or won't have. that is more Directus. That's locked into Directus, and it will say no if they don't exist. So just a thought there. What we did was a lightweight check, but it is not foolproof, and I've just realized in this moment that that's the case. But that's fine for this. We've acknowledged it. We've shared that with you, and we've given you an approach. Now, I think that's it for what we can do here. But what more could we do? Firstly, we need to handle that rejection state better. When I hung up, can't be bothered now, but I'll figure it out. It will find its way into the blog post that will accompany this. One thing that's really cool, if I just come back to my screen share, is these are real users, right? And they're queried using the composables that are exposed to this view component here, this extension. But you have access to all the collections. So let's say, for example, you have customer calls or customer notes, customer note, whatever, a timeline of events, and they exist in your project. You could select the user, get maybe their latest notes, and then call them. So now you have context. Additionally, Insights dashboards have this concept of a global relational variable. So what this will do is you select Directus users in here. Let's say we want first name and last name in here. Let's not have them overlapping each other. You could select a user from here, and this now contains the UUID of that user or the object of that user. I can't remember. But you could feed that into this panel. You could feed it into the panel that gets customer information. So you can have multiple parts of your dashboard all changing because you selected the user once in this global relational value panel. So there's so much, there's so much you can do with this. And I'm just really excited for more people to see Directus Insights as a really valid app builder surface, more than just insights and BI. So with a couple more minutes to go, if anyone in the chat has questions, please do chatter and let us know. Nathaniel, do you have any closing thoughts while we wait for those?
No questions, but the thing is, I'm really trying to think about other ways. So there's obviously building your own mini contact center, because contact centers are big and expensive, and actually sometimes what you need is, you don't want this massive stood up huge at scale contact center. You just want to be able to have the ability to contact your users just really quickly, and you can start building applications like this. You can then also, because you're using Twilio phone calls, you can access a lot of other Twilio functionality. We've got voice intelligence, transcriptions, where you have a phone call, at the end you can run AI operators on it to just be yo, this person the person asked for a manager, or the person was happy. We can just do sentiment analysis and have that just pop straight into a panel, for example, because you are just connected to that ecosystem as well. So there is way more than just the calls that you can do, but it all starts with the ring ring.
Yeah, and I suppose you can query APIs for that data as well from within here, as we have just demonstrated, and we spoke about with the weather API, example way up top. You can just call off to arbitrary third-party APIs and bring data in via custom endpoints. So yeah, there were no other questions in the chat, so I'm pretty confident at this point, saying I think we are off the clock, which is wonderful. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me for this. I had a really fun time putting this together and delivering it with you.
Always enjoy hanging out with you. Next time we go on a roller coaster journey, we should write another workshop as well.
Which is what happened. Sorry, that's what happened. We wrote this basically while going to a theme park together. We had a long drive, but something good came of it. Wicked. Well, on that note, thank you so much everyone for joining in. We will see you somewhere. Bye. Oh wait, where can people find you?
Oh, online.
To find me.
They can email me at nokenwa@twilio.com. I do check my emails. And yeah, just say hi.
I was ready for you to be I don't check my emails, but you can send me an email there. All right, we're done. Bye.